Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Best Games Period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is not Daniel Jones, it's not Jeremy Brown, but it is Chevy Ray Johnston.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome. You haven't been on the show before. What's up with that?
That's on you.
I know. I invited Chevy on because he's working on this indie game called Eichenfell that came up on my radar, and I thought it looked interesting, so I wrote a thing about it. I interviewed him for it, and he agreed to come on the show after all that was said and done. So thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And you nominated for this week Super Mario RPG, and we'll get to that. But first, how are you doing? What are you working on? Tell us more about Eichenfell and your history of making games, all that good stuff.
Sounds good. I'm doing great, thanks, actually. Things have been going really awesome, just as far as Eichenfell and work stuff is going. As you maybe knew, or the viewers maybe don't, I was actually published by Humble Bundle, the company. They said they picked up publishing games, mostly indie games, and I was in the first batch of games that they picked up to publish, and things have been going really well since then. They've been doing just great, helping me with a whole bunch of things. We've got some good, really fun stuff planned for the release of the game and launch and promoting it and all this, so it's just going really well, and it's made my life a lot easier to have a lot of the marketing and also publishing and biz dev stuff off my back. It's been a lot, and it's like, suddenly I'm like, oh, I can see the end of development in sight, and it's not as terrifying anymore, and it's making me feel really positive. So that's been great. But to talk about the game, I'm making a game called Eichenfell, which is a turn-based magic school RPG about like a whole bunch of kids who go to magic school, and something really ridiculous has gone down, and you have to kind of solve the mystery with your group of friends. Something like maybe the Harry Potter kids would, or if you've read. It's inspired by Rainbow Rowell's Carry On, which is a book I really liked, which inspired me to write it because I realized I really like the magic school setting. And I've wanted to make an RPG my whole life. I've tried it 1,500 times and it failed every time. And then this was the time it worked. And the game feels good and it's fun to play. So yeah, it's been going great.
Yeah, one of the very first things I thought of when I saw your game was it kind of came across like, how would a Harry Potter type situation go down at a magic school if Harry Potter suddenly disappeared? And there was a muggle, I guess if Dudley was a good character and showed up.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
To investigate.
Yeah, if Dudley wasn't a douche.
Yeah.
He was actually like a really good brother, but he didn't have magic powers and was kind of jealous of Harry. And they were also gender swapped. Like that's sort of like a little bit of Eichenfell's like story conceit. You play as an ordinary, which is a muggle in Eichenfell's world. And you don't have magic actually, but your sister goes missing at the school. Something scary and weird and dark has happened at the school, and you go there to find her, to rescue her, even though you're not a magician. And you have a lot of trouble getting in at first, until suddenly you get magic powers. But that's not a thing that happens in Eichenfell's world. People aren't supposed to just suddenly get magic. It's very unusual and rare, and so it happens to you, the main character. And part of the mystery is you're not the only one it's happening to, and it's about unraveling why this is happening to certain people. And it's this big mystery you have to unfold, and your sister's at the center of it, and you really just want to save her because you're worried about her.
Yeah, it seems like a really sweet game. And also a fun game. It has a lot of interesting, kind of a retro visual flair. And you said it's almost done. Do you know when it might be coming out?
We're aiming for summer 2018. So
okay.
It's not almost done. It's just well underway. Like, it's got a lot of momentum. All the mechanics and all the game systems work great. I get people to play it for hours and there's no bugs, like stuff like that. I'm like, cool. Like, this is like a product. Like, the end is in sight, so yeah. Something tragic would have to happen for it not to get done at this point. It's going really well.
Awesome.
I'm not even worried about jinxing it. I'm just gonna ride with whatever comes.
For sure.
But yeah, so that's like the story, and that's actually really where it all started. I had been thinking about turn-based gameplay mechanics for like 20 years, so I had already known I had lots of ideas for that, and ideas are just that, they're ideas. But it was like I needed something to root it in that I cared about a lot, and so I spent months actually before really programming the game mechanics in the game, just thinking about what I wanted this game to be about and who the characters and the players were in this world and what the point of them was and what the point of it all meant and what it all meant and what it was all about. So I slaved over that for a really long time. And then when I finally was happy with it, like it was months later and I still wanted to do it. That's how I was like, okay, if it's been 4 months and I still really want to do it, I'm not going to not want to do it after another 4 months. Like I gave myself time to make sure it's what I wanted to do.
Right.
Because my previous projects all would get canned because I would get excited. And then months later I would be like, oh, that's not actually what I wanted to do. I just was excited in the moment. So I Can Fell came from a place of like deep thought. I thought about what I wanted to make. And I say it's a turn-based RPG, but you really have to see I Can Fell to get what it is. There's a lot of game mechanics in the game. There's a lot going on. It's not a copy paste or a clone of another game. You've never really seen the battle system like it. You've seen sort of, you're like, oh, it's got hit timing mechanics like Mario RPG. Oh, it's kind of got like a horizontal battle grid like Mega Man Battle Network. Oh, but it's turn-based. Oh, but you have multiple characters in your party. Oh, but there's no MP and there's no, like, the numbering system's all weird. And there's like all these other things at play. So it doesn't really feel like an RPG you've played, but it kind of feels like a lot you've played because they're all at the heart of it. So it wears its inspirations on its sleeve, but it really is something new, I think. But it's just kind of hard to describe. So I rather just like to say it's a turn-based RPG and then let people see it, and then they're like, oh, cool, because it sounds just douchey if I try to describe it in like technical terms.
Right. I feel like a lot of describing things in great detail can kind of come off feeling that way.
Yeah, and I worked so hard to make it look good and play well. Why am I telling you? Like, just look.
Yeah, just play it.
Yeah, I already put in that work. I don't have to just run my mouth off, which I'm already bad enough at doing.
Well, you came to the right place of running your mouth off, because that's pretty much what this podcast is all about. Running our mouths about games. So, and you mentioned that I Can Fell was inspired at least a little bit by Super Mario RPG, which is the game you nominated for the best games period this week.
Yes.
And for people who are just listening to the show for the first time, possibly the first time ever, the best games period is just a show where every week we talk about a new game and we kind of just talk about what makes it really great. And it can be great for any number of reasons, but by the end of the show, we try and kind of nail down whether or not we think it is one of the best games, period, or if it's merely just a really great game that kind of falls short of maybe falling into the Video Game Hall of Fame, or if you want to be artsy-fartsy about it, video game canon. So that's what we're going to be discussing about Super Mario RPG this week, which I don't know about you, but I think Super Mario RPG might be one of the more forgotten RPGs of the Super Nintendo era. Like, everyone seems to have heard of it, but I don't feel like a ton of people have played it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it had a little bit of a resurgence. I think it went up on a couple of the Nintendo stores, like a Wii U download or something like that. So it had a little bit of a resurgence, like some Twitchers and YouTubers playing it. I watched a YouTube stream of a guy playing it not too long ago, about a year and a half ago. And I Can Fell time, that's 0 days. But yeah, and I've seen a few people talk about it. So people have played it, but I don't know where they're picking it up from, like where it got. But still, it's not that popular or well known. But if I mention it, like on Twitter, for example, I got a lot of people replying to me. So it is a dear game to a lot of people, but not a lot in it's not in like Ocarina of Time territory. It's like 2 tiers down from that. It's like Ocarina of Time's like an order of magnitude more popular than Mario RPG ever was.
Right.
which is weird because they came out, I think, in the same year or at least under a year apart. And I think that's a big part of it. Was 3D was just on the cusp, and the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation were just coming out around that time. And there was like Final Fantasy VII, and there's all these hype 3D games that had huge budgets and amounts, and 3 years of work put into them all that came out like immediately after it. So I think it just kind of lost its steam too quick. It was kind of cut off. If it had come out in like 94 or 95, like maybe just after Chrono Trigger, because Chrono Trigger is still loved like crazy, but more so than Mario RPG, I think. But I just feel like maybe it would have been treasured a little bit more. But I don't know. It's just kind of a weird game too, so maybe it's just a cool little oddity.
Yeah, you're right. It did kind of come out when the Super Nintendo was kind of in decline and these newer things were on the horizon. And what you do mention that Super Mario RPG is weird. And I think that might be one of the biggest understatements ever.
Yes. That's also what makes it so good. Yeah. That's what we're going to be talking about today, is how weird Mario RPG is, because that's absolutely what I love to talk about.
Yeah, because I had played this as a kid, and it had been a long time since I had revisited it. And so when you brought that up, I was like, great, I've wanted to talk about Super Mario RPG on this podcast for years. And this is finally my opportunity to do that. And so I figured I'd better go back and play it to kind of refresh my memory. So I did that over the course of last week. And
oh, excellent. Because we both replayed it within like 2 weeks. That's great. Yeah. Really fresh.
I had forgotten just how many weird things happen in that game. Like, so before we even get into the story, because we're going to get there.
We should actually like describe what this game is, just in case some people don't know.
Oh, we will. But I was shocked at how many like unrelated tangents Super Mario RPG goes off to like explore. It's so surreal. Surreal is the word I kept coming back to when I was trying to describe it to other people. But do you want to take a stab at kind of talking about the story real quick? Like the general story. And in case people don't know, we generally spoil things. I don't know that Super Mario RPG has a ton to spoil in it.
Yes, the story's alright. It's not the part that you're gonna die for. It's a short game. You play through it in a couple days. But so it's worth playing 100,000% even if you know the whole storyline, so.
For sure.
But yeah, so to describe Mario RPG, you have to describe where it comes from. So it's like two companies were really, really, really popular in the SNES age, and it was Nintendo for all their famous games. Donkey Kong, but Rare did those, I believe.
Super Mario,
Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, Metroid, Super Metroid. I mean, like all these great games, and then SquareSoft, who was doing the Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger. They had a ton. They had a bunch of games that only came out in Japan too. Like they were just outputting stuff like crazy. They must have been doing really well. They were selling games overseas from Japan really well as well. They were up there with like Capcom with their popularity. So they were both doing really well, and so they collaborated on a game. I don't know who pitched this or where this came about, but I'm so glad it happened, because it's like it's on weird levels that match like Kingdom Hearts. Square just does weird stuff sometimes.
I actually found a quote about where this came from.
Oh, excellent! It's
from a guy named Yoshio Hongo to Maximum the magazine in 1995. I've never read it or heard of that magazine before, but this is the quote I found. It said, Square's RPGs sold well in Japan, but not overseas. There have been calls from all ages and from young girls for another character to which they could become attached. Mario was the best, but had not been in an RPG. Nintendo's director, Mr. Miyamoto, also wanted to do an RPG using Mario. There happened to be a chance for both companies to talk, which went well. And I guess that turned into Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars.
Okay. So what becomes really apparent as soon as you're like, cool, Nintendo's making an RPG. But what really became apparent was Nintendo just gave Squaresoft their IP and then didn't really check on it too much, I think. Like and I think it's what makes it so precious to me is that this game would absolutely not happen now. And
no.
as we're talking about the weird stuff, you'll start to understand why.
Yeah, as far as I understand it, what happened was Miyamoto was given oversight of the Square team and the Nintendo team, but what ended up happening there was I don't think he was paying a ton of attention, and so every time that he would like check in on the game, he'd probably gave like a few executive notes, and like they would add a more Mario themed thing, or like, because like the tone of this game is just a roller coaster. Like there are some parts that are like, this is definitely a Mario thing, and then there's like a level just full of cloud people and that are being taken over by bird people, and one of the main bird antagonist woman has very jiggly breasts. I don't think that would fly if Nintendo were paying a ton of attention.
There's all kinds of weird stuff about that part I can get into as well. But so it became apparent that like Squaresoft was just kind of like, cool, we're making RPG, and we got Mario and we got Turtles and all these guys, and they obviously didn't look too closely at a lot of like the Mario IP stuff. Like, okay, so I've worked on a few game IPs for companies. I developed a Pac-Man game, for example, for Namco. It was a puzzle game for the iPhone. When you develop a game with a big IP, they hold those very dear. There's ways the characters have to look and the ways you have to present them. So this game was a mobile Pac-Man game, so we wanted to have a cute graphic style. But we kept feeding them like ways, and they were like, no, Pac-Man can't look like this. His eyes can never be on the top of his head. There's all these rules. And this is really common for a lot of IPs. Mario has very strict guidelines now. That's why every packaging you see him on, every 3D, every game he's in, he looks really similar. Nobody's they add nipples and stuff occasionally, but they...
I mean, people lost their mind when they added nipples to Mario.
It's like one thing changed, and look how crazy it was. But if you made like Mario tall and skinny, and like one of his ears was bit off, like people would be like, "What?" And Nintendo would not allow that. like you can't get crazy. Like you just... And it's about keeping a strict just control over their IP. It's like a thing companies hold really precious, and the bigger they get, the stricter those guidelines get, so that their IP doesn't get like out of hand. I don't know. It's a thing. It's a big company thing. So this game wouldn't happen now for a lot of reasons. Like there are turtles like based on the Koopas in the game. They just don't look anything like real Koopas. They have like weird masks on and like elf ears. And there's Goombas look roughly okay. Yep. They kind of make sense. It's like the first enemy you fight in the game, and that makes sense. It's like when you start playing and there's like you jump, but like in Mario, there's like the big question mark boxes you jump on. Mm-hmm. In Mario RPG, Square was just like, no, they're just gonna be treasure chests, and made them giant floating treasure chests that you jump underneath. There's no like question mark blocks or bricks. They just bricks actually do appear way later in the game, but yeah, there's no like question mark blocks or things like that. They just like didn't do that. It's like if you were gonna get a kid to draw what you know about Mario. It'd be like Mario, a coin, a question mark block. Those aren't even in the game. It's like now Nintendo would be like, where's our like precious question mark blocks that defines what Mario is? It's weird.
Or like a fire flower. Or like a lot of the iconic power-ups aren't included at all.
There's mushrooms. There's no flower. There's
feathers not in there.
Flower works differently. Flower's your magic points.
Oh, yeah. I guess.
That also has a weird system to it, because they just like made up kind of how RPGs work. Part of me thinks that was maybe Miyamoto's influence on it.
Yeah.
Where they simplified it. They're like, don't add every character MP and all this stuff. Just show their HP in battle. Just give them all one MP thing. Stuff that RPGs didn't do, like simplifying stuff.
Yeah.
Which made it really fun. So they all shared from one MP pool, and like a lot of games didn't have things like that, like weird simplifying rules. In Final Fantasy, you would deal damage, you'd do 4,000 with 4 hits in a row. In Mario RPG, at the end of the game, you do like 200 damage. And like through most of the game, you're dealing sub 100 damage. You're like 7. You're like, sweet, I did 7. Like the numbers are really small, and that was cool too and rare.
I did some looking into this, and I guess what had happened with the development of that battle system is that Square had designed like half the game and hadn't implemented a battle system. And so they showed it to Nintendo, or they like kind of off to the side in secret designed a battle system, and then the game's like 60% done, and they show it to Nintendo. They're like, yeah, we designed this battle system now. There's a battle system. They're like, I guess everyone they showed it to is just kind of shocked that they had included this RPG system in a game designed by Squaresoft.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why it's a little bit more simple. Like, I was reading a bunch of reviews just kind of gauge the room on the reaction to Super Mario RPG, and I guess a lot of people have gripes about how simple the combat system is, which I find that odd, because even replaying it now, it's a fun game to play, and I think a lot of that comes down to how the combat mechanics, more than anything else, are structured around timed button presses, and everything's about timing your attacks, and that's really where the fun kind of comes in. It keeps you engaged in the battle process. It's not just selecting an option and then a thing happens.
Yeah.
And I think that works in the game's favor, especially with a younger audience, which this game is very clearly not trying to be aimed at adults in 1995 with Super Mario Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that gives it a lot wider appeal. It gives it more staying power, because I'm still surprised to this day when I play a turn-based RPG and it doesn't include time-based button presses as part of the standard attack mechanic, because that's just so fun. Like, I enjoy that. I enjoy it a lot.
I think people get simplicity and brevity a little bit confused a lot. They mix the two up. They see, oh, this doesn't look like it has a lot. But Super Mario Bros. Didn't have a lot. You ran and jump. But the game is still really good and always will be really good. Mario World had a lot of other stuff, but all you did was run and jump, mostly, with some other things. But it doesn't have a lot. So you play a game like Final Fantasy VI, which I love. I could talk about that game till the end of time as well. But that was my second choice for this, by the way, or Final Fantasy III in the West. But that game has every million characters, a whole bunch of summons, all these magic powers, and all these things. But I don't think of it as being more... Like, I don't think of Mario RPG's system as being negatively simpler than that. I found, even as a kid, I found Final Fantasy VI really simple. I would go into battle and I'd press A a bunch and win. There was all this stuff, but I just did the same thing to win battles in that game that I had to in Mario RPG. That game just had all this other stuff I didn't have to use. I just got to choose to use it, I guess, but there was no gain. And I think the brevity part is about, like, only keeping what you need. And so the game, it's like almost minimalist. It reduces things down a lot, and there's not much. It reduces that to the point where they're like, man, we don't even need a menu. There's just 4 buttons, and there's only 4 things you can do. So let's just make those 4 buttons do that.
Yeah,
that was great. Like,
from a UI standpoint,
so nice.
I love the battle.
Yeah,
one of even the major boss battles in the game is centered around the fact that you use that very specific UI. There's a boss called Bowyer, who like midway through the fight will be like, I'm gonna screw you over now, and he like shoots an arrow and disables one of the menu options that you can take.
Yeah,
depending on it's great. I love it.
He makes an A, a X, and a Y button fall onto the stage, and then he shoots him with an arrow. And whatever one he shot, you can't use that. So it's like his trick to the battle is just completely disabling one of your things. Later, there's also a boss called Croco, who's like this like thief you encounter several times. You have to fight him twice. He's a boss fight. And he always like steals you. He's like a thief. He steals your stuff. In the localization, they gave him all like, he's all like a mobster, like an Italian mobster. He's like, use guys. And he actually steals all your items in the middle of a battle at one point. He just hits you and a bag pops out of you, and then you can't use items for the rest of the battle. It's pretty wild. You're like, oh dang, like if you just had to heal, you were like screwed. So that was kind of cool too. Like, it does little things like that where it's like mid battle. That kind of stuff was really fun. No RPGs were doing fun stuff like that. The only game that did weird stuff like that was Earthbound.
Yeah, and
that's that game's weird.
I mean, talking about weird stuff that Super Mario RPG does, I love that there are a lot of battles that kind of they play around with the whole concept of boss battles. They're not necessarily hard because of what your characters can and can't do. They're hard because, like, there's a giant squid boss that will just randomly take a character off of the map, or there's another boss battle where it starts off with a giant bird coming in and taking your character off, and they have to do a 1v1 battle before it comes back to the normal 3v however many battle.
When you fight Jonathan Jones, the shark pirate, if you defeat his minions and he's the last one left in battle when you defeat him, he'll be like, yo, Mario and me, just you and me one-on-one, let's finish this off like real men or whatever. And then the other two characters go and you have to finish him with Mario. And it's really hard because he's like really strong. And he does this on a spell that like boosts up his defense, so you barely do any damage to him. And you're like, geez, Mario doesn't have any healing either, so it's like makes that part like really hard. But if you like defeat him and leave one of his cronies alive, he'll just die, and then you can just whack off the crony, and then you don't have to fight the hard version. So there's like this weird trick. So some people may not even have ever known that was a thing in that boss battle. Like, it's just so strange.
It's super fun too, because if you do get the 1v1 section, like the other two people in your party turn into like cheerleaders, and like he has his own little shark people who are cheerleaders.
They like root on the battle. Yeah.
It's so freaking charming.
What else? Yeah, every boss fight kind of has a weird quirk to it. They all... It's weird because they had such a simple system. I'm surprised that they got so much out of it, actually. One of the things I'm doing with Iconfo is always like looking at the system and be like, what's a new way I could look at this? Like, oh, what if tiles had like... What if I changed the way that you thought about like the ground? Or like, what if an enemy like did a spell that swapped your positions? Like, nobody's done that before. It's something you have to rethink how you play the game. Like, and the game does that a lot. Like, one boss duplicates himself. That's a pretty common video game thing. It's a trope. It's a trope at this point. But another one like eats your characters and spits them out and makes a clone of them.
Yep.
He's a sewer monster that, first of all, if you've seen his sprite, I don't know who invented this, but it's weird. He's like a weird sewer dog that only has 2 legs, and his legs are really thick. I think he's got 4 legs, actually, but his sprite looks weird.
Well, his face looks like it was drawn by like a 5th grader.
Yeah, he's got like stars drawn on him. It's weird. It looks like a kid's drawing that came to life. Like they just took something off the fridge of one of the developers and made it into like a boss. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it is that. And he eats your characters and he spits them out and he makes a clone. And depending on who he chooses to do it, they'll have like different strengths. So it's like, it's so weird. That's not that weird, I guess, but all the bosses kind of do like a weird thing like that. They have some quirk to them.
We were talking about the battle system, and I think there's not much I would hold against the battle system. Like, I didn't think it was too simplistic. I thought it was fun, and it like changes things up enough. Like the only 2 status effects, like there's like you can be put to sleep, you can be muted, so you can't cast spells, you can be turned into a giant mushroom, and you can be turned into a scarecrow.
Status effects. Yeah, they obviously just made up stuff for that too. They didn't use Nintendo stuff. They just like, let's just take Squaresoft RPG statuses and put those in Mario. So it's like, you get... There's a status effect called Fear, where you're like shaking. Your attack power is really low, which is interesting. You can fall asleep, which works like most RPG sleeps. If you get hit, you wake up. Turning into a mushroom is weird. When you get turned into a mushroom, you can't do anything. Your turn just passes. But you have really high defense, and you automatically heal.
Yeah.
So enemies turn you into a mushroom, and you just sit there and heal, and you can't do anything. I was like, it's a weird thing to do. There's one where they turn into a scarecrow, where you can only use your magic powers. You can't use your regular attack anymore, which is kind of neat. But it's like a scarecrow, sure. Like that's so weird. One of the abilities that turns you into it is called Scrow Funk.
Yep.
They couldn't fit it. It was supposed to be Scarecrow Funk, but it's just called Scrow Funk. And some character plays like a tune, but the tune that plays isn't funk. It's just like plays this like little canned tune that they use for a lot of special effects in the game. It's like dee-doo-doo-doo, and like musical symbols go up, and you're just like boom, one of your characters turns into a scarecrow. You're like, did you just sing me into a scarecrow? That was really cool. This game is weird.
I think the only thing when it relating to like the battle system, and it's not even like a battle system problem that I have with Super Mario RPG, it's more the game structure is that there are a few boss fights where there's no break in between them. So you end up having to fight 2 boss fights in a row with no opportunity to save or heal or anything like that, and that can get frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, it has some old RPG problems, which are, to me, are actually just a lot of old game design problems. Like now, saving is like every game just saves. Iconfell, every time you walk from a room to a room, the whole game saves.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's just like the game is just constantly saving. And then you can also manually save at cats in the game. If you ever find a cat, save at them. But that way, if the game crashes or anything happens, you can load pretty much literally just where you were all the time. And I'm like, the old games just didn't have that. Like, that wasn't a thing.
Right.
But these days, it's like, nope, like, I am not gonna make someone play through a boss and then lose their save and play through it again. Like, that's, like, inexcusable now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, only speedrunners will put up with that stuff.
Yeah. I guess one of the... I'm trying to, like, think of things to criticize Super Mario RPG for, and so I guess the only other thing related to the battle system I would point out is that the game never really explains that creatures are weak to anything. You kind of just have to discover that for yourself, which isn't so much of a problem when it comes down to, like, a binary choice, like, do I use a special attack or do I use, like, my normal attack? Like, that's fine, but there are some characters that are weak to, like, fire attacks or lightning attacks, and the game never really tells you that. You would just have to have happened to use that one spell.
You have to use, is it Mallow or is it Bowser's spell? It's Mallow's spell, right?
He
has a spell that can, like, read enemies' minds, and I think it tells you if they're weak against stuff. But I might be wrong.
Maybe it's that psychopath spell?
Yeah, I think psychopath has that, yeah. I think if you time it. Anyway, I kinda like doing that, but
it's just that with the amount of stuff that the game goes out of its way to explain, it's weird that it wouldn't explain that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the systems are just a little bit too opaque. Not that I like things being explained to me, I like just things being... information being clear. It's like an arrow pointing to which enemy you're targeting. That's not the game over-explaining. That's like it giving me information I need in order to make decisions. So, like, there's a difference between just, like, hand-holding me and just telling me what is happening in the game. Like, the second one is really good. You want people to know so they can have fun and explore and try stuff, right? And it can be a lot. Like, sometimes an enemy will, like, use an ability. It's like, brrr, and a thing goes around them, and then that's it. Then it's somebody else's turn. You're like, what did he just do? What did that do? And then you kill him in 2 hits and he's gone. You're like, the enemy just used an attack that did nothing. It's like, from everything that I can tell from the information the game has given me, the enemy just made a barrier around itself, and I killed it, and then nothing happened after that. What? And I think a lot of the opacity wouldn't be so bad if the game were a little bit harder, which is why I think that the criticism about it being a little bit easy is a little bit valid. This time I was like, I remember that this game was sort of hard when I was a kid, which means that now I bet it's going to be really easy because I play a lot of hard games. And so I was like, I'm going to play through and just get as little experience as I can, never grind, just go through, like, as fast as I can, and, like, try to always, like, have myself set up for a hard boss fight. Yeah, it's so easy. Like, I would do battles where I wouldn't get hit. I would just use I knew how to use all the spells, and I would just whoop every batch of enemies, and, like, just never game over. It was weird. It was just, like, so easy. And I was like, man, I tried to make it that hard. Like, I tried to play it in a hard way, and I knew what to do because I played the game a zillion times. So it's like, players who don't know what to do and are getting lost and incidentally grinding more are going to have an even easier time. So I was like, oh, okay. And because of that, difficulty is really good for drawing out your game systems. That's part of what makes it so great as a tool as a designer. Is when something's hard, you have to say, like, man, I can't beat this. What else can I do?
Right. So
players will be like, if your game is just hard in a bad way, they'll just quit. But if it's hard in a good way, they'll want to play on. And you'll say, okay, well, like, what else can I do? Maybe I'll switch characters, or what's this ability do? And you'll try it. Or you'll get desperate, or maybe you'll be like, oh man, maybe I'll just go look around the town more, and then you'll find a weapon shop you didn't know was there, or, like, you'll look around more and you'll try and experiment and learn new things, and that's fun. That's the kind of non-hand holding that's cool, where it's like all the stuff's there. But the information difficulty draws that out. And so I think because the game is a little easy, a lot of its opaque systems and a lot of the cool quirks and abilities enemies have is you kind of just blitz past them without really realizing it because there's no text on the screen or no like icons for certain status effects. Characters have indications when they have status effects, but enemies do not. So you never know if an enemy has a status effect on it. It's weird. Yeah, strange.
Beyond the battle system, so I think we got that covered.
Yeah.
What to you are some of the main draws for Super Mario RPG? You are the one who suggested that we do this. So
yeah, okay. So Mario RPG is way more fun to play and just explore than almost every old RPG for a lot of reasons. There's a couple that are still fun. Earthbound, Chrono Trigger are both still fun. Final Fantasy VI, not so fun anymore. A lot of old RPGs, not so fun anymore. They're very tedious. Graphics don't really hold up that well in a lot of them. You walk slow. Everything's so text-based. There's menu stuff. Mario RPG immediately drops you in. It's really colorful. It's on a grid, but the graphics are so like weird and amorphous in 3D that it's kind of hard to tell. So it seems like you're really exploring like a big open area a lot of the time. And you move really fast and you can jump around. And you couldn't do that in any old RPGs at all. You never could just run around and jump. It's effectively like all 3D. There's like platforms you can jump on, which is, I think, why they probably got so far in the game before they added the battle system. Because they were just like, man, there's all these cool jumping around mechanics, and they were adding all these weird puzzles with moving platforms and stuff. There's all this stuff in the game, and there's timing puzzles you can do, mini games everywhere. And part of that what makes it really enduring to play, because every new area is a joy to just walk around in. And I've told, just before you go on, like,
yeah,
I've told people about this with Eichenfell, is the big thing is you spend a lot of time in RPGs, in a lot of games, but in RPGs especially, walking around. So walking around has got to be fun. You've got to make walking around fun. Just walking around should be fun. And what makes walking around fun? Running does. Being able to move quickly. Have you ever seen people play Ocarina of Time? They roll constantly because it is literally the only thing they can do. It's the only other thing they can do when they're running from point to point. It's boring. So Mario is great. I'll just be jumping constantly because I like hearing the noise. I'll jump to the rhythm of the song. Like, just I do that constantly through the game. You can jump on people's heads. You can jump on their heads when they're running around, and then they'll carry you. Like, there's just fun stuff to do while just looking around. And the point of the game is to look around. And the other thing is, they made it super fun, and this is the important part as a game designer, you can't just stop there. They made it super fun, and then they reward you for having that fun.
Yeah.
You'll be running around and exploring, and then you're like, oops, I jumped. Oh, wow, you can go behind this house? What? And then there's a character behind there that says some secret, weird, quirky thing, or tells you something like lewd or whatever. Like, oh, that's cool. Or you'll find an item, or there's a character who's like, oh, I actually don't work in this castle. Don't tell anybody I'm here. And he gives you an item. And you're like, oh, I just found this guy who's like snuck in the castle. But I'm a nice guy. You can bounce on beds. You can, there's secrets just everywhere. The game is absolutely littered with them. So, and at some point you'll accidentally find one or two. Like, you'll jump and just hit an invisible treasure box. And as soon as you hit one, you now are just like peering at the world through a new lens. You're like, I'm going to explore every nook and cranny. And I can bounce around on people's heads and jump on beds while I'm doing it. Like, that is great. And this is in a game, and it's not just about a battle system. It's not just about an RPG. It's not just about saving the world. It's about walking around. And it made walking around fun, and that's huge.
Yeah, and not only that, but you mentioned, like, how pretty this game is. And
I kind of did. I said it looks interesting.
I think this game is absolutely gorgeous. Like,
I have mixed opinions about how it looks.
Like, one of my first thoughts after completing this game was just, this game's really pretty. Like, in terms of what the Super Nintendo could do, Super Mario RPG is pretty much maxing out the visual engine, I guess, that it was capable of. And, some people aren't super into that kind of 3D-ish style that it was going for, which is fair. But I like looking at all of the environments that they made, like, and how off the rails they got, and just kind of how very clearly they just kind of were given leeway to do whatever they wanted visually. Like, the first levels are Mario's house, and then you go to Bowser's castle, and Bowser's castle is like just a giant, it's literally a castle in the middle of like a gigantic crater that only has one bridge, and it's on the back of a giant carved Bowser statue. Like, that's the foundation.
Yeah. It's worth implying that the game itself tries to trick you into believing that it's a normal Mario game at the beginning. That's a whole, like, setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you first start the game, you start a new game, you don't know about any of the other stuff, any of the RPG stuff, other than it's called Super Mario RPG, and the box art kind of spoils stuff. But you play it, it's like, go save the princess. You're like, oh, it's a Mario game! And you go, and then you go into Bowser's Castle, and you're running around with Mario controls. So you're like, cool. But then there's, like, Koopa enemies, and you touch them, and you get into, like, RPG battles. And you're like, okay, alright, but it's a Mario game, so you go through Bowser's Castle, you find him, and you rescue Peach. Or Toadstool. You're like, cool, it's a Mario game. And then, like, stuff goes wild. Then there's like a loud rattling and a gigantic, like the size of Bowser's castle, sword with a face on it falls from the heavens and pierces Bowser's castle and sends everybody flying out of it. And Mario doesn't seem to realize what's going on. He just gets sent flying and lands back at his house. And then Toad is like, dude, what the heck happened? And Mario's like, he's like, go back to the castle and get Toadstool. What the heck? You didn't come back with her. And Mario's like, okay, like, seemingly unsure about what happened to him. And he goes back to the bridge, and then he looks and he's like, what the heck? There's this giant sword in the castle? And this is alarming for a few reasons. This is like, this is the first time that you're like, okay, I'm playing something different, and it's because, have you ever seen a sword in a Mario game?
No.
No.
Okay.
Weapons don't really exist in Mario games. There's not really swords and axes, and there's not things designed with the intent to kill. Bowser doesn't ever intend to kill. He just does stuff. He's like, haha, I'll trap you, or I'll turn everybody little. Like, that's the worst thing Bowser's gonna do, right? I'll make everybody small, or I'll make it so everybody has to look like Bowser. Like, he's got weird, dumb plans, but they're not. He doesn't want to like commit genocide. Like, he's not like an evil human. Like, he's just like a weird guy who just kind of mischief maker. These things are literally weapons. They're like things designed with the intent to kill. And you're like, whoa, that's scary. And you basically, your planet has been invaded. He's like a smith who creates weapons of war. And he takes over universes with them. It's implied, I think, that he's like one of many smiths. So there's like some universe out there which is just an alien race of a whole bunch of smiths. And they just go and they build factories and carve a zillion weapons and take over worlds with them. Which is like, holy crap! That is a terrifying and weird villain for a Mario game. That is like... I mean, that could be in a steampunk, like, a gritty steampunk novel. That could be a storyline. Not a Mario game.
They never, like, outright say any of that stuff, but you're right. It's, like, heavily implied that that's the case. Like, they're these multidimensional beings that just take over other dimensions.
Yeah, well, you actually have to go into the sword's mouth to go into a portal. A lot of it is said, and a lot of it's said with descriptors and storyline stuff. Like, it's implied there's a bunch of smithies, because when you go, you actually see, like, a whole bunch of them on the ground when you're fighting the final boss and stuff. Like, it's weird. There's a lot of weird stuff. Anyways, so, first off, and that's what's cool about it. It's like you're up against something Mario's never been up against before, and you kind of got to do it in a way that Mario's never had to do it before, and that's really what the whole game's about. You have to play with Princess Toadstool and Bowser. Like, they're never your allies. They're always like side characters, but suddenly they have to be your allies because you're up against something new and scary and big.
And Bowser wants his castle back.
Bowser is the most Sundeer character in this game, and it is wonderful.
Oh, I love Bowser in this game. Like, he cries so much. It's great.
Yeah. His
crying animation gets me.
Yeah, he's great. He makes up excuses for why he's helping you. He's like, yeah, we're doing this. He's like, always acts like, he's like, yeah, these are my minions, even though you're leading the party and stuff. At one point, he, like, does it, and he says it out loud. He's like, yeah, we'll go save it, like, you guys are all working for me and everything. But then everyone in the room just kind of, like, doesn't say anything, and it's obviously implied that, like, he's not fooling anybody, so he turns around and he just like looks down and looks all sad. And Mallow like walks up to him and like puts a hand on his shoulder. And he like comforts Bowser, and there's no text. He just like reaches over, puts a hand on his shoulder, and then Bowser looks up, they make eye contact, and they both nod, and they turn around, and the conversation continues. And you're like, what was that really touching moment between Bowser, everybody feeling pity for Bowser, a made-up new character for this game who's like a prince, just had this like weird moment, and it was like really touching? Like, what the heck's going on? It's so strange. I loved it. It was great. That was one of my favorite moments, though, of this playthrough that I never really noticed when I was younger.
I personally found a deep and abiding love for Johnny in this game. Johnny the Shark Man.
Jonathan Jones,
that's right.
Johnny Jones, the shark.
He's a shark man, and he runs a underwater pirate ship, and he like just shows up after you beat him, and he's like, we're best friends for life now.
Oh, no, he, like, respects you for, like, what...
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, he likes that you, like, proved yourself. He's one of those characters.
And he gets a nice shot in the end credits where he's just, like, standing on a pinnacle overlooking the ocean during a sunset.
I do like that he's a pirate of a sunken ship. Like, he's a captain of a sunken ship because they're sharks and they're all fish and little shark creatures. That's cool! Like, I've never seen that idea done before.
And he has a cape.
Yeah, he's got a cape, yeah.
He's a shark
with
a cape.
He's got a cape and a what do you call it, like a trident, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's got the most epic shot at the end of the game, which I didn't remember at all. I don't know if you saw it, I tweeted it. It was like this image of him just like standing like a mermaid kind of on this rock, and there's this epic sunset in the background, and it's like a big sprite. And I was like, whoa, that is hardcore cool. So weird. And he was like a character that was in the game for like half an hour.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of like the credits, because we just talked about that, like, I love the great lengths that Super Mario RPG goes just to be charming. Like, the entire credit sequence is a giant parade.
Yeah.
And they specifically made sprites for almost all the characters in the game.
Yeah, every
just for that
character,
parade.
every main character you meet, there's a separate parade sprite made for them for that game. I don't know if you've made games before, viewers, but if you haven't, that is a lot of work. Like, to do all those sprites would take me like a month or something. Yeah. On my own, obviously. And a month is a lot of money, a month's work. And just because you split it across 3 people doesn't make a month's work cost less. Like, that's a lot of money. So I don't know, they just like went way overboard with the credits. It's really intense. That's a thing nowadays, though. Nowadays, like, movies and games do really cool credits, but they didn't back then. It was like word sliding by. Maybe some screenshots.
I was absolutely shocked when I learned that this game started development in 1995 and came out in 1996.
I don't understand. Yeah.
Like, that's
a turnover is ridiculous.
But also, I liked a lot of the other original characters that they added to Super Mario RPG. And often that's not the case when you add new characters to a long-running franchise.
Yeah.
But, like, Geno is great. He's like this little doll that gets...
Yeah. Okay, can I talk about Geno?
Yeah, go for it.
I'd love to talk about Geno. I was telling my partner, actually, immediately after like I finished playing the game, about how much I liked the scene where you find Geno. I didn't think about it too much, but I like overthinking stuff now, so I was thinking about the Geno scene, and I really love it. The best part about Geno is that Geno's a character who is he lives on Star Road. He's a god, basically, like a demigod who lives in the skies, and he works with the other demigods up in the skies to grant wishes. And the whole storyline of the game is when the sword came down and destroyed and broke the seal into you, like, in the cut into your universe, it destroyed this, like, Star Road, and wishes are no longer being granted. So that's actually, like, the real problem. It's not that only that you've been invaded by evil weapon-bearing monsters, is that, like, wishes are never going to be granted ever again. And there's actually a place you can go in the game where you climb this crater and you find all these fallen stars, which are all the wishes that never got granted. And it's devastating. You walk around and you see all these wishes that never got granted. Or at least that won't be granted if you don't save the game. And it's actually, you're like, wow, I want to save the game now, because like, I feel so bad for all these characters, because these are all the things that won't happen if I don't beat the game. That was really cool. But that's where Geno comes from. why is he a doll in this game is because at one of the towns you go to called Rose Town, which has amazing music, by the way. I love that song. Holy moly. Look it up, Rose Town Mario RPG. It's just the wild song. It's got such a groove to it. You go into this one house and there's this kid called Raz and he's playing with his toy dolls. In Mario RPG's world, the Mushroom Kingdom, not just the Mushroom Kingdom, everywhere in the world for some reason, Mario is really famous. Yep. And he's famously known to be a jumper. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's Mario, the one who can jump really high."
Whenever you need to prove who you are, you just jump.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, you're real.
Yeah, and you realize that Mario had never really had a narrative before Mario RPG, so they kind of had to be like, "Wow, man, if you were like a character, what would you like know about Mario?" It's like, well, he jumps like 16 feet high. Everybody would be wowed by that, so they made him famous, and that's what they made him famous for. So everybody's like, "Oh, can you please jump for me?" And quite often you have to press the A button to like make a cutscene go on to like jump. And as you go through the game, he starts doing like more and more impressive jumps. At first he just jumps, then he starts doing twists in the air, and once he does like a double, like triple twist, and it's really great. Anyway, so he's like, "Oh, cool, you're Mario, oh my gosh." And he has action figures of all the Mario characters. Like, you're all famous, and he's got action figures of you, and he's playing with them. And so he's got a Mario and a Peach, and Toadstool, and Toadstool's being, he needs to save her, and he's got Bowser, and he's like, "Oh no, it's Mario and it's Bowser," and he's like running back and forth playing with them like you would as a kid. And he's like, "Oh, Mario, will you please play with me?" And his mom's like, "No, Raz." And he's like, "Oh, please, Mom, this is the only chance I'll ever get. This is Mario, he's in my house." And she's like, "Oh, would you mind?" And Mario's like, "Yep." Like, he never says no to anything. He's insanely positive in this game. So like, "Okay, I'll play with this kid." He's like, "Okay, so you can be Bowser." And Mario's like, "What?" So he makes me play Bowser, and Mario's like obviously disappointed that he has to play the bad guy. And he's like, "And I'm gonna fight you with," and he stands behind the Mario doll, and he's like, and then he runs behind the counter, comes back out with this other doll that wasn't like visible at first. So the whole scene's throwing you for a loop of like what you think is gonna happen. And he pulls out this other doll. And this doll, it's implied as just this like ratty doll that he made. Like, it's just like, it's like scrapped together. If you see the model for it, it's got like stitches and stuff. So it's like maybe his mom made it for him, or maybe he just made it himself. It's obviously just like this piece of crap. And when you're a kid, you know, you'd like have like Barbie and Lego, and you'd make them like play together. Like, you just kind of just had
you'd have toys that wouldn't go together.
A toy car that would talk to, it's like that. Like, he's just a kid, and he just has this other toy. He's just like, "Yeah, this character I made up, and his name is Gino," because he thinks that sounds cool, right? And so he's like, and I guess so when he's playing with you, he's like, "Okay, like, fight you," and you take turns kind of like attacking each other with dolls. But then he like shoots Gino's like toy arm off, and it like misses Bowser, and it hits Mario in the face and KOs him. Like, so he like knocks Mario out with this toy. And then Mario gets KO'd, and then it's like, it's implied that they're like, "Oh crap," and they drag him up to the bed to let him sleep there for the night because their kid knocked him out. And he's a hero. They probably feel very embarrassed. So it's implied that, well, it's not implied, the whole time there's this character in the sky named Gino, who's not named Gino, he's just looking down at you, and he apparently was watching this whole scene, and he's trying to come down to Earth the Mushroom Kingdom in order to help save the day. And he was like, "I need a body, I need a vessel in order so I can be on this world, but I need the strongest one I can find." So when he was watching, this is what he saw. He saw you playing, and he's like, "Dang, that doll's strong." Like, so that's who he chose to be, because he thought Gino was actually really strong. So he's looking down, and he was like, "Oh man, that's badass. That's what I'm gonna be." So he goes down and gets in the Gino doll, just because this kid convinced him, because he lives in heaven and he doesn't understand the real world. He just saw a toy and he thought the toy was really cool. And I love that.
Yeah.
And he comes down, he gets in it, and he's like walks into the wall a few times. Like, he doesn't understand how to be like a real life being. And then he runs off to go save the day. And later you find out his real name was like a whole bunch of like inexplicable or unpronounceable symbols, but he just takes the name Gino.
Yeah.
And then he joins your party. So you just had this like life-size doll that a kid made as like one of your party members, and it was a really cool new character who is not in Smash Bros, and it's really sad.
One of my favorite parts about that scene that I noticed playing it was Mario's reaction, because he's watching the kid play with the dolls before the kid notices him being there.
Yeah.
And in the scenario that the kid is playing out, Bowser hits Mario's doll character.
Yeah.
And it sends him flying into the wall. And I think the reason the kid has him play as Bowser is because Mario got quote unquote killed in this scenario.
Yeah.
Like that's why Jenna
He's got like
step in.
defeated, says.
Yes. And Mario has like this completely stunned reaction, like a little character. His character model is all surprised.
Yeah, this kid, he's just his brutal fanfic, which is just like undoing Mario, because Mario never loses to Bowser. That's also like brought up several times. Everybody's like, "Come on, Mario, save the day, like you always do." But Mario's just like, "I don't understand. I'm fighting swords. What are swords?" And the game gets weird too. There's a lot of weird stuff. Like, if you look at Mario games, bad guys tend to be these big, soft, squishy things, and a lot of them are in this. But there's also some scary stuff. This is my favorite enemy in the whole game, and I'm not kidding you. It's a big, purple, disembodied pig head with a whole bunch of other small, disembodied pig heads attached to it, like in clusters.
It's gross.
It is
I hate that thing.
the most nightmare fuel enemy. And when it attacks you, they all spread apart like flies and then like clamp onto you. And it's like, what is this? Stephen King, godforsaken stuff. It's like, what? That is nightmare. What the heck? It's so scary looking. And I'm like, how is this in a Mario game? It is the weirdest enemy, and I love it. It's my favorite one.
My personal favorite encounter, I have a couple that really stood out. One is not necessarily like the character model itself, but the concept of the character. It's I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's like Yardiolich.
Yardovich, yeah.
Yardovich.
Yeah.
He's a spear weapon, and he can duplicate himself, and part of what he can do is he can become like an entire town's worth of people and disguise himself.
Yeah.
Which is pretty terrifying on its own. But when you actually fight him, he takes off his head and puts it on his like this stick thing that he has and uses it to stab you.
Yeah. So to explain, he is a spear. He's like all the bosses are weapons. One's an axe. One have a whole bunch of weapons. One is a sword. One is a knife. One has bombs. One is a bow and arrow. Like the boss itself literally is a weapon. They're all literally weapons. And he's literally a spear. And his head is a spearhead, but he's also holding a post. So he actually like pulls his head off, puts it on the end of the post, stabs you, and then puts his head back on. I thought it was great. Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
But my other favorite encounter in the game is when you fight a cake monster.
Oh yeah, the cake boss. Yeah.
Cake boss.
That boss was a big like brick wall when I was a kid. I didn't understand how to fight it, the mechanics. And it has a couple attacks that it doesn't attack that puts fear, which lowers your attack power on all your characters. And it also, the less you attack it doesn't matter how much damage you do, but every attack you do makes one of its candles go out. And I didn't realize that as a kid because, once again, it's really opaque and nothing's explained in the game.
Yeah.
So it's like you had to just kind of figure it out by watching it. I didn't understand that it used its more powerful attacks. So then I would just get like fear on everybody, and then I wouldn't do any damage, and then I eventually get whooped. And I remember just having I always get stuck on that boss as a kid. And then I found it used by fearless pins, and that's how I'd always beat it. But now I just like beat it without any trouble. I like beat that boss in like 2 minutes. I was like, oh, that was so hard when I was a kid.
The thing that struck me about it, though, like playing this time, is it's freakish because it's not supposed to be alive. It's not like it was intended to come alive. And the second thing is that it's like when you watch a horror movie and like a scientist brings a creature to life that was never intended to like have life, and it's like gasping and like trying to survive and it doesn't know how. Like the attack animation it does looks like it's gasping for breath, and it creeps me out a little bit. Yeah.
This boss is so wild. Like it came out of nowhere. So the framing for this boss is Booster, this other character we haven't even gotten to yet, but he abducts Toadstool. This is before when you finally find her, you're like, oh man, I'm rescuing Toadstool and I'm only halfway through my adventure. Cool. Because you thought she was in the castle still. So you just find her and rescue her. But she's like, Booster, this character, is just trying to marry her, like, completely against her will in a really kind of, like, scene that wouldn't be cool in games now. But, like, so they're just having this crappy wedding, and he's, like, doesn't understand how weddings work. So he's just kind of, his minions are all trying to throw a wedding for him, and it's just going disastrously. They, like, kick everybody else out of the wedding hall, and they're all pretending to do stuff, and, like, anyways,
Booster's one of my favorite characters.
You break up the wedding, like you screw everything up, and it gets canceled. And they're like, "Dang!" And then the two chefs who are making the cake come in, who are like, one of them is like a real jerk, come in, and they're like, "Here's the cake," and it's like, "Oh, the wedding's off." And he's like, "What?" And he's all mad. He's like, "Oh, you ruined the wedding! I worked so hard on this cake. Like we wanted to make this amazing cake." And so you battle them because they're like really mad at you because you screwed up the wedding that he worked so hard on this cake on. And then, so you're battling them and then the cake, but the cake's just in the battle sitting there. It's just a cake. So you're fighting these two chefs and you're like, okay, cool, and you fight them. But like, you can't do any damage to them. The only thing you can attack is the cake, which is funny because you're obviously just like making them matter. It's like these guys are mad at you and you're like, oh yeah, you're just like punching their cake. You're like, oh, I don't understand. Like, it's so weird. And so you punch their cake a bunch for some reason. You're just inciting violence at this point. Like, you're just baiting them. So you punch their cake a bunch, and every time you punch it, starts moving. But the thing is, I thought it was supposed to be like, oh, their revenge, so they made a cake that's like a monster, like, because he kind of seemed like an evil dude, the chef. But he's surprised when the cake comes alive. He just accidentally baked a sentient cake.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Yeah, so it's really weird. It's like you accidentally baked a sentient cake, and it's a really hard boss. I love that. And so they run off, and then you fight this cake. And then, at the end of it, then Booster eats it in one bite.
Yep.
Eats the entire cake.
Booster is my favorite original character that they added to Super Mario RPG.
You like him more than Geno?
I do, because I guess he's like this eccentric rich person who happens to live in the Super Mario universe.
Yeah.
Like, he owns this entire tower.
Yeah.
And he's just so rich,
Doesn't like, he own the casino as well?
I believe so.
Because, Knife Guy, I think, works at the casino. So I'm assuming Booster also owns that, because they were, like, Knife Guy and... What's the other one?
I don't remember.
Guy. There's, like, his two... I think they're, like, his top muscle agents, yeah. They're, like, the people that go out and, like, beat people up to get money for him, yeah. Like... Yeah. Anyway,
he's so out of touch. He has like a train
child,
system that goes through his tower.
He's a child in a man. He's a rich child in like a weird, gross mustache man money. He inherited it. Like, you go through his tower and you see like his entire line of family, all the Booster families and stuff. So he's just like this like gross rich jerk who just has a huge tower. He's a great character. He's so weird, and he like rides a train around. Like, he's just a little kid.
He looks like Hagar the Horrible on like shrooms. Like, he just has these really bug eyes and a gross mustache.
Yeah,
and he doesn't understand like how basic human emotions work. Like, at one point, Princess Toadstool's crying. He's like, "What's this?
What's happening?
I don't understand. This water is salty, delicious." And then somebody's like, "Oh, I think she's crying." He's like, "Oh gosh, that's disgusting. It's corrosive, like the sea."
Yeah, he's like a super sociopath.
And there's an entire sequence dedicated to him having strapped Princess Toadstool to his back and, like, not understanding, like, he forgets that he strapped her to his back, and so he's like, she's playing hide and seek now, I gotta go find her.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And he runs up this hill, and, like, Mario's chasing after him, and you have to jump over these barrels.
I actually like that minigame. It's my favorite minigame in the whole game.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's really hard. And you only get to do it once, too, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's why I like it, because it's like, when you do well, you're like, yes, I don't have to load my save. Because if you load your save, you have to refight the knife boss, I think.
Right.
I think. Yeah, you do. You have to. So you can't even just redo it. You have to fight a whole boss fight if you want to redo that minigame. That's crazy! Oh, man. Because all the other minigames in the game you can redo. That's the only one you can't. I forgot about that, where he had her strapped to his back and he didn't know where she was. She's just like, I hate this guy.
But I mean, that's what I mean. Like, when I replayed this game, there were so many sections I just didn't remember at all.
Yeah. Everything's really absurd.
Absurd and surreal is probably the best way to describe Super Mario RPG.
Yeah, the surreal stuff, like the weird disembodied floating pig heads, and what's some other weird surreal stuff? A lot of the bosses, like the crazy sentient cake. You mentioned
parody of the Power Rangers that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, that boss just appeared, and then you fought it, and it was gone. They weren't even like the giant axe was mentioned earlier on, and then you finally see it. You're like, oh, that's cool. It's like a spaceship they fly around, I think, like the sword. Basically, they fly a giant axe and a giant sword around through space, which is sweet.
So, like, when it comes to the story of the game, like, I love the broad stroke story of Smithy invading the Mushroom Kingdom. I think that's really cool. And like you mentioned, like, Smithy has all these weapons, and weapons are pretty much like a foreign concept to the Super Mario universe. It's not like Mario's defending against Bowser and Bowser pulls out a literal handgun and just shoots Mario to
exactly.
death.
There are like, because like there's hammers, like the Hammer Bros.
Yeah.
In a first Mario, they actually threw like kind of brutal looking hammers at you, but they were moved on to being like those big cushy ones that look like foam hammers. And so it's like, oh, this is a hammer. In this game, they're like big foam hammers. There's another thing that they just like reinvented for this game. They're like, no, they'll look like this. I'm sure that's what they look like in the old one. Like, they just didn't stick to the style guide at all. So they give a Hammer Bros. Oh, also Hammer Bros are like 15 feet tall in this game because even though they're like, they're tiny normally, but in this game they made them giant. But Smithy has like these like enemies that are like hammers. They're like actual hammers. And so it's like hammers also exist in Smithy's world, but they're like real hammers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had never tried to read into Super Mario RPG at all, but kind of just putting on my pretentious hat, I was like, oh, this was literally Mario fighting the military-industrial complex. That's literally what Super Mario RPG is about.
Pretty much.
Like, Smithy's just making weapons. That's what he does. And obviously, if you make weapons in the Super Mario universe, like, that would absolutely destroy it. Like, the concept of having a military-industrial complex in the Super Mario universe would obviously destroy the world, would destroy the wishes, the magic of the universe.
Yeah, it's definitely got the military thing going. Like, Smithy is like, he even sends out like denizens to take over like each of the towns through subterfuge and stuff. It's weird. Like,
he's literally fighting a war. like systematically sending out these different agents to each town. And like, it's a very whimsical war because it's Super Mario Brothers, but
it's strange. Yeah, the storyline is like, it's hard to identify like a central theme in the game because it's kind of weird. Also, it's like, actually, the localization is really good, which is also surprising. And what's one of the things that makes it hold up very well is the localization is really good. That's part of what makes Earthbound hold up so well as well. The localization was given a lot of care. Whereas games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, there's a lot of points in the game where you're like, that conversation didn't make sense or fell flat, or also like used the wrong words, or like Final Fantasy VII is notoriously bad at some points. Like, it's just so bad. You're like, this scene is supposed to be important, but it's just like, it sounds like kids texting. And the localization is really fun. There's a lot of energy. And every single character in the game has a personality. There's no like canned characters that are just like, I'm in Man 4. Like, you're like, no, everybody has like some quirk or thing they like, or weird way they behave, or something that sets them apart from every other like NPC in the game. That's crazy. That's a huge amount of work for a game with this many like townspeople in it.
We haven't really mentioned it, but speaking of just like communicating and stuff like that, Mario doesn't talk. Like, it at least keeps with that tradition of Mario not talking.
Yeah.
But he does communicate, and it's some of the most entertaining segments of Super Mario RPG is when Mario is trying to convey to another character. Yeah. It's the best. Yeah. It's the best pantomime.
Yeah. So there's a couple powers they have in this game. One is like he pantomimes things, and when pantomiming, he can just like float or like act out things. So yeah, he'll explain something to someone, and you'll see him like, which takes a lot of code to do that. Like they had to code him like running around acting out the scene instead of just saying text, which would have been so easy. Or just get a other character to show up and say text if you don't want Mario to talk. But he pantomimes, and it's really fun, and the sound effects and everything for it. But also whenever they're trying to describe like what does he look like to someone, they will literally like at one point they're like, what does this Krakow guy looks like? And then Mario like turns to Malo, and like Mario like spins him around. Oh no, Mario like spins around, and then he turns into Krakow, like literally. And then he spins again, and he's back to himself. Like he does like a Sims when they change clothes. He's like, this is what he looks like, and he just is Krakow for a minute, and then he turns back, and you're like, Mario is just like master of disguise. Like he can just like transform into somebody to explain. But it's like, I like that because it's like a symbolic shorthand for describing what someone looks like, rather than saying, oh, they look like this. Just being like a character being like, boom, and like just looking like that. That's a really cool way to like convey that, and I like that. That's another form of like brevity through like playing fast and loose with like rules, which this game does a lot with.
Yeah, and I honestly can't recall any other silent protagonist ever talking like they do in Super Mario RPG. It's very unique.
Yeah. Oh, I hate silent protagonists. I think it's the worst thing that stuck around for... It's
way too long.
It feels like one of those things people just do and don't think about why and if they should do it. It's like one of those game design things where designers will often just add it to a game, but they won't think about why they're adding it. And it's like there's some canned reason like, you could identify or project yourself into the... It's like, okay, yeah, I know you're saying that, but can you and do you? Like, there's one thing about like making a mechanic and being like, this level makes the player feel this way, and then people play it and it doesn't. That's when you change it, because it obviously isn't achieving what you want. And I think they just say silent protagonist thing a lot and don't actually like think about if it's like, really, are you really projecting yourself into Mario's shoes? Because I'm not really. He's like a hero, like he's famous and everybody loves him, and like he's not who you're supposed to be in this. He's another character that you're watching.
No, you're supposed to live out your dream of being a slightly tubby Italian plumber.
But yeah, and so in some RPGs, silent protagonists are just literally like Farm Boy 5, and you just go on an adventure, and you literally are nobody the whole time. So it's kind of like that's easier maybe to project to because they're so blank slate. But Mario's not blank slate. Everybody knows him already, so it's weird to choose to make him silent. But now that's just a thing. Like Mario just doesn't talk. He just says woohoo and stuff. He does talk,
I need to take it back.
He can talk.
Yeah.
He talks in Superstar Saga series. He says Luigi, and Luigi says like Mario. They talk. they just don't say words.
I was gonna correct myself because there are a couple points where Mario does talk in Super Mario RPG, and it's when you can give direct. You can choose his responses.
Oh yeah,
like
that's
you
right.
can answer different characters. And I love that this game gives you the opportunity to make Super Mario a really big jerk.
Oh, he could be a huge jerk in this game. I really liked that when I was a kid. You can do a lot of really jerky things. The game gives you opportunity to a lot. At one point, you have to like, there's this guy that needs to get into his house, and in order to get into his house, it's like up on a hill. You have to like jump on his head and then jump up there. It's kind of a cool secret to find out. It's not really a secret, but that's what you do. And you go in, and he's like, yeah, just go press the button to make the stairs appear. And you go in his house, and the button is like between these like two floating treasure chests.
Yep.
And so you're like, dang. So if you jump on the button and then go down and then let him in, he's like, thank you. And it goes in, and then he's like, cool, thanks or whatever. And then he's like, oh, my treasure's okay, sweet. And he gives you an item. And if you just go and you just take the treasure chest, he'd be like, oh, what, did you steal my stuff? And you can then lie to him. And just say like, no, I didn't take your stuff, even though you just took it like 5 seconds ago, and it's literally on your body at the moment. Like, it's like, oh, you can just be a total thief. And it's like you're just taking advantage of people because you're famous. Like, you can just go in their houses and jump on their beds and stuff, and like, oh, you can mess with people so bad.
My favorite is there's a little kid who's like jumping up and down on a bed, and he wants to be like Mario. And he asks you, do you think I could ever jump as high as you? And you have the option to be like, yeah. And the other's like, wouldn't count on it, kid.
It's not even just no, it's like the meanest way to say that. It's like, you?
So you can completely destroy this NPC's dreams. And he thinks you're a jerk. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, you can be a jerk to a lot of characters in the game. It's odd. It's kind of funny that Mario could just be a jerk.
Something that would totally not fly today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. But we were talking about like a lot of the opaque mechanics and problems with the design and like how I like the direction it took. I actually think the Mario and Luigi games are like a true evolution. They feel like that's like the next logical place to go. They were like, cool, let's build a battle system based on like minigame mechanics and like timing. And they made the timing more interesting rather than just always pressing the button. It was about like watching moving things and like there'd be enemies with like would have like a big rope and you would swing it, you'd jump over the rope. Or these enemies that two of them would be holding like a thing and they'd run at you and you'd have to jump, but then they like alternate the timing or like rotate. It was really cool stuff, and so it became this like interesting like 3-dimensional jumping video game about like avoiding attacks, and that was like, but it was still very much feels like a JRPG, and it's really cool. That feels like those games really like, at least the first two, they started getting weird later on. Partners in Time is just absolutely amazing, and probably a lot more accessible than this game.
I'm torn because I like Mario and Luigi a lot. I'm not sure I like them as much as I like Super Mario RPG though.
They're soft. They have the IP problem. They were softened around the edges. All the characters were. It doesn't have weird hairy spiders and pig head monsters. It doesn't have swords designed to literally kill people. It doesn't have weird, raunchy, sometimes lewd, suggestive things. It doesn't have like, it's missing the weird, sharp, crusty, obviously overlooked edge everywhere in Mario RPG. And that's why they're good, they're well designed, great games. Gameplay mechanic wise, they're actually like a whole level above Mario RPG, I think. Like, a lot more fun. But like, you're just fighting things that would be in a Mario game. You're not fighting, what am I fighting? It's not like, what is this terror that confronts me?
Right. It's hard to pin down. To me, I think what weakens Super Mario RPG more than like the mechanical problems it has and like the datedness of some of its systems, I think the story itself could have been a lot clearer and more impactful.
Yeah. The ending feels rushed, which is weird because the credits are incredible, but the actual ending sequence with the boss is really strange. It has like no proper lead up. You just fight a bunch of bosses with very, very terse conversations. You have no like, there's all these sort of plot threads in motion. Like there's, so here's what I would do. Toadstool, every character kind of had this journey and they kind of sort of left a lot of them hanging. This is where it's going to be heavy spoilers for story stuff. So, so it's like, Mario is just famous. That's his thing. And that is interesting because he kind of has to confront that he has to literally go out and save everybody, but he also has to travel the world and see everybody and see that monsters are real people and also like, face his fans face to face. He has to meet them and like see who they are, and he can choose to be mean to them. There's some stuff there. He's kind of like lame. He's mostly just who you run around as because he's got the best controls. Mallow is like an abandoned child, which it's never explained why he was in a basket with a note. They claim that they lost him as a kid, but why was he in a basket with a note? They never explain that. So it's like, first of all, thanks for explaining that. Like, why? Did you actually throw away your kid, and then when he came back, you're like, oh, we were wondering where you were. It's like, what? That was weird. Yeah, that was odd.
Mallow never asks any of the pertinent questions you would expect a character to ask when they've been abandoned their entire life.
Oh yeah, he's Sky royalty for people who don't know the storyline. He's like, you find him and he's living with tadpoles in a pond, and he thinks he's a frog, but he's clearly just like this weird cloud guy. And so when he's like, the guy who runs Frogophusius, like the noble sage toad who runs the pond, is like, Mallow, I have something to tell you. You're not a frog, dun, dun, and all the tadpoles swim in, and it's like plays this really intense music, and they're all like, "Say what?" Because like everybody was convinced he was a toad, so it's like that's hilarious. But also, it was like kind of a scene where he has to be like, "You should go with Mario to find your true family. Like, you belong somewhere else." And he says he found him in a basket with a note, and then you find him, and he turns out he's royalty, which is really cool. He decides not to stay at the castle to help you save the world, which is also cool. Like, that's a noble thing to do. But
and he has like an arc that deals with like him being a hero and like finding bravery because he's kind of a coward early on.
Yeah, he has to be a grown up, and like that's really his only thing. But it's kind of like they didn't dive deep enough. Like, you never really got to see more of that, mostly because like all this weird stuff's happening, and so they never like happen too much. So it's like, there's something there, and like his whole family thing. It's like, well, how did he get abandoned? Why did it happen? See, if it was my story, it would have been like they actually got rid of him, and then he showed up again, and he'd be like, "Yo," and take over his kingdom again. But that's okay. That's not very Mario. But that's what I'd do. Like, you had to fight his parents. It's the boring trope story, but that'd be fun. But so that was weird. And then next you get Geno. Geno's got, actually, his storyline makes sense and has a conclusion. Like, at the very end, he like drops out of his body and his star flies off, and everybody looks really sad when he leaves his body. But then it's showed that he like visits them again. He like comes down and visits them, and they're all like, "Yeah!" And it's really cute. So they actually played his storyline fairly well. He gets a lot of talking throughout the game because he's the only one who knows what's actually going on. So he's okay. He's also a new character, so he probably had to be explained the most. Bowser's a great storyline. It's paid off fairly well. You understand that he has this like, he has to like, all his minions abandon him because he's a really crappy boss and he was mean and he's too hard on them, and like they're all scared and he's not being like enough of a father figure, which is really interesting. So it's like he learns over the course of it to be like nicer to his like subordinates, and like he also has to learn to like stomach his pride, which is a thing. Like, Mario has to be the leader of the party, and has to follow Mario and listen to him. And like, even though he doesn't want to act like it, he wants to act like he is at a loss because he needs Mario's help, but he wants to make it seem like you need his help. Like, so he has all these like weird pride complexes, and like he's jealous of Mario and all this stuff. Like, he's just got all these issues, and you kind of get to see him poke with that. So that's kind of fun. Toadstool just doesn't get any storyline, which is way too bad, because when you first get her, she actually isn't supposed to go with you. She sneaks out of the castle to join your party, which is really cool.
She like concocts an entire ruse to escape the castle unnoticed.
And nobody knows until the very end when you meet a Toad in the final boss level who got there somehow. I think it's the same Toad from the beginning. It's him.
You're right.
It's like, Toadstool, what are you doing here? It's like none of them noticed she was missing. It was great because she left her grandma disguised as her, which is also a cool thing. Like, someone helped her. But so she had this whole storyline where she was like, didn't want to be royalty. Like, all this cool stuff could have been done with that. Like, she also felt like she kind of like has this whole thing where she's always gets saved and saves the day. There's so much going on there that could have happened more, which would have been fun. Like, what's her stake in all this? And like,
her character is never really explored.
You know, she's the best like party member in the game, so she's immensely powerful in the game mechanics. Like, she's so cheap. She can just fully heal your party every time she gets her turn. It costs nothing. It's like, what? That's one of those things that makes the game like way too easy. She heals like all status effects. You're like, what? And she also has powerful magic, and she can also has a powerful attack. Why is this character so good? Why does she always get saved? She's like the most powerful character in this game.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so like all the characters have this like, there's this whole thing going on, and I don't know. I felt like it could have been done more. And the bad guys, like, you don't even meet the final boss till the very end. You have no idea like about them. Yeah, so the storyline just kind of like ends. And you kind of feel like you've just started getting invested in all these characters and their plights. And it could have been, I don't know, they could have done something a little bit more with it, I think. I think the Paper Mario games are better at that. Each character sort of has a journey, and they're better at wrapping up those journeys. But still, a lot of the side characters get skipped over in those games as well.
Yeah, I think what happened with Super Mario RPG is that a lot of the game feels very episodic. Like, each new part of the map kind of has its own one or two story arcs that happen.
It's from star to star. Yeah.
Yeah.
Each star is a story arc, basically.
And it lends it doesn't, I guess they didn't take advantage of that in the right way, because oftentimes, like, for example, that entire sequence with Booster has almost nothing to do with
any of the rest of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
The stuff with Johnny, like, Johnny's segment is a huge level. It's a big thing. Doesn't really have much to do with anything else.
Yeah, I guess you did really get to learn a lot about the other characters, but never your party members. That's odd.
Yeah.
Because you got to see, like, the relationship between the bird and the queen. Like,
yeah.
She was super mean to the bird, and the bird very obviously resented her, because every time she walked off screen, he'd be like, "Arr!" and he'd be fuming, and he'd, like, peck the statues of her because he was so mad, and you're like, this is horrible, like, she's so mean to him, and he hates her, but we don't know why he follows her around so loyally, even though he hates her so much, obviously, or, like, resents her, so there's, like, something there, like, so that was really interesting, and you got to kind of see that, and Booster was interesting because he's a weird sociopath, crazy child who's rich, and, like,
Birdo's never really explained.
Birdo's random. So this is one boss.
I just realized that.
That's one of those random mini bosses that's like plopped in. Yeah.
And never mentioned.
Yeah, ever again. Yeah, that was really weird. And also, like, after you beat Birdo, it goes back into the egg somehow because they couldn't remove the sprite. I think it was part of the background.
Yeah.
That felt slapped on, but it's really easy boss too. It's really easy to, like, block its attacks, and when you block its attacks, it can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I had a weird, easy, random boss that was plopped in.
And then the whole, like, the mountain really didn't have anything to do with anything either until the very end segment.
Oh, the volcano.
Where the boss just appears. Yeah, the volcano. Sorry.
Yeah. It's also a good song.
And that's something we haven't, I guess, really touched on a whole lot.
The volcano looked huge. It looked like it was going to be, like, a big area, and you blitzed through it in, like, a really short sequence.
We mentioned that a little bit. The music was composed by Yoko Shimomura.
Yes. Who I believe also does Kingdom Hearts.
Yep.
Yes. So she does the weird Square games.
Yep.
She does Superstar Saga, Kingdom Hearts.
Final Fantasy.
She does some Final Fantasy stuff, yeah. She worked for Capcom a bunch, I believe.
Yeah, she did Final Fight and Street Fighter 2, the
World Warrior. That's, she did Street Fighter. I was like, she did some,
yeah.
It's the one she did that's like, that's her actual, like, yeah, so the composer for Street Fighter did the music for this game, and it is out of control, and if anybody knows anything about that game, this is what they know. They know Mario RPG music, because every YouTuber uses it, it's in all these gaming things. There's 100 zillion OC remixes, which is Overclock Remix, like big gaming remix community. Yeah, so they have remixed Mario RPG. There's a whole album. There's like a zillion remixes of all the songs. They're famous. And it's cool.
So good.
It's completely invented though. There's a few songs that use Mario themes in them. Like there's like one part which is like a fake Mario 1 style like dungeon where you get to the Yoshi's Island, and like there's a few songs, but almost all the rest of the songs have its own themes. It's completely original music written. And it's really cool. It's really, really, really good.
And it fits. Mm-hmm. It fits everything. Like, what kind of music would you compose for fighting a giant cake boss? I wouldn't know, but Yoko Shimomura figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah, this stuff, man. Yeah. That was my favorite part. I used to just love the music for this game when I was a kid. I thought it was so good, yeah.
And she loved it too. I guess she has gone on record as saying that Super Mario RPG is the soundtrack that kind of, I guess, made her as a composer, in her opinion.
Yeah, she had Kingdom Hearts too. She just gets the weird games. The weird mashup games. And she just, like, slays. Like, just does such a good job, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've probably gone a little bit over time.
Yeah.
But what are your closing thoughts on Super Mario RPG? Is it a best game, period? And if why not? You know, what's your final argument?
I think it's an amazing game. I don't think it's one of the best games. I think it displays something we've lost in games, or at least we lose when we stop allowing characters and things to be weird. Like when Like when you have too much control over an IP, or you're too afraid to reinvent an idea. And it did that. It took something we knew, like the Mario world, and broke it down and kind of reinvented it. Like you see it happen these days. Like there's a new Riverdale that kind of relooked at Archie, and there's the new, and I think that's great. We don't have to remake things all the time, but I really, not just with games, but I like that it like broke down the RPG genre and like picked it apart, picked the things it liked, and then reinvented it completely. And I just want to see more of that in games, and that's what I think. I think it's an important game because it did that. It made a game that was like accessible to kids and fun and weird, and it was an RPG, and it was using characters, but it used them in the wrong way, and it just did all this broken stuff, and it did it wrong, but it did it really well. And I just love it for that. I can't really piece it together. I'm really nostalgic for the game, but I also think there's a lot of game design in it that holds up really well that needs to be examined.
Fair. I agree with you to an extent. I think that Super Mario RPG, like you said, is kind of this weird mess. Like it's not smooth. It has a lot of jagged edges in it. It has like these imperfections. Like the story doesn't fully deliver on any real key concept beyond that slightly out of like left field military industrial complex analogy that it draws with the bosses and stuff. But it has so much going on and so much to say about RPG mechanics and how developers can freshen things up. I definitely think like if you're making an indie RPG, you need to play Super Mario RPG, like because that will at least give you ideas or maybe help you think outside of the box for what you can accomplish with what seems to be a really simple system of, well, attack, special attack, and items, and defend or run away. Like, that doesn't, if you look at it just on a surface level, there doesn't seem to be like a whole lot you could do there, but Super Mario RPG just like shoots for the moon and does really crazy, unique things that I think do work very well. And so just to close things out, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it that you decided to spend almost 2 hours talking about Super Mario RPG, which I think is fantastic. How can people follow you, find you online, follow your work, all that good stuff? Where should they go?
Yeah, so find me on Twitter, Chevy Ray. You'll probably see it wherever this is posted. You can link to it. I tweet a lot. I do respond to people a lot. You can, my email is open to people who want to talk about RPGs or ask me about game mechanics or design or have questions. And if you want to learn more about the game, you can go to iconfell.com, which is where the game's located. And see some screenshots, and there's a press package there. So if you're interested in writing about the game or sharing the screenshots, there's a whole bunch of stuff there you can get. But yeah, I tweet about the game a lot. I show GIFs. I post videos. I talk about how it's made even a lot. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, then I do talk about all that. And yeah, you're welcome to come say hi.
That's awesome. By the way, before we go, can you tell me real quick how you managed to get the musicians behind Steven Universe for your game?
Oh, I didn't even mention that. That's like one of the coolest things about my game.
Yeah, I was really curious because that was really awesome.
So they've been doing a lot of work on Steven Universe recently, so I haven't been able to. So they're kind of like, I've been working with my sound people, so I kind of forgot momentarily that I have like some of the most amazing musicians working on iconfell. Yeah. I just messaged them and asked. I didn't just message them and ask. I sent a message, a DM, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for musicians for my game. Can I send you an email with like a pitch if you're interested? And it's like, yeah, maybe we're interested. Like, send an email. So I sent a big email, and I described the game, the depth, like the characters, what it all meant, and like where the heart of the game was, and a whole bunch of screenshots and like where it was going and why specifically I wanted them, like what they do and what they're capable of, and what the kind of music they write fits my game, and how and why it ties into what I'm doing, which is why I was choosing them. And so that's what I did, and I think that helped a lot. They were looking for new games. I knew that as much as well, so that helped. So I got a good time. So it was good timing, plus just like it wasn't just I just didn't want the musicians from Steven Universe. My game needed the musicians from Steven Universe because they had something that the game desperately needed, and now they turned the game from something. Oh, I can't talk about any of it. There's some incredible stuff that's going to happen in the game music-wise that I won't talk about, but it's going to blow people away. So yeah, follow them as well. They're amazingly friendly. They're two of my favorite people in the world.
And very talented people as well.
Very talented people.
And that was Chevy Ray Johnston, there's a T in there, talking about Super Mario RPG. And we did not run a Twitter poll last week for Journey, which, that's our bad. We need to do better about doing polls. Daniel, I'm looking at you, Mr. I only run polls sometimes and other times I forget, and you're not here to defend yourself, so I can call you out. I can name drop. Hopefully we'll be doing one. Well, not hopefully. We will definitely do a Twitter poll and a Facebook poll for Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. Let us know what you think about that game. I'll be interested in hearing because, to be honest, I'm a little bit torn on it. I would come down on a yes, even if Chevy would come down on probably on a no, as he said. So, let us know what you think, because this game is universally loved. And I am not entirely sure if it's loved based on nostalgia or if it's loved genuinely on its own merits and if it has a claim to being known as one of the best games, period. So let us know what you think. You can follow us and let us know on @bestgames, on Twitter. You can also find us over on community.extra-life.org, which it's a great site. You can find out more there. We're also on SoundCloud. We have a Patreon if you want to support the show, and that would be patreon.com/bestgames. And you don't have to support us on Twitter. We put out this show every week for free. But if you wanted to help us kind of cover the costs of making the show and donate $1 per month, that'd be pretty great. That would help us a lot, actually. So, you can also get unique, exclusive episodes on Patreon from time to time. We do have time to record those and edit those. So check that out. You can find cut content there as well, stuff that might have made the episode too long. So, there's that. And, yeah. This is the part of the show where I talk about Extra Life, which, if you didn't know, is a wonderful charity. It's part of Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. And essentially, people play games and they raise money to help sick and injured kids, which, hey, that's pretty fantastic. And guess what? You can learn more by going over to extra-life.org. And when you're there, you can even sign up. And the cool part is when you sign up, you can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to raise money for, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids at the hospital. Really fantastic. Highly recommend you check it out if you don't know what it is. I also recommend that you sign up and maybe donate a few bucks or get some friends or family to donate. Really great cause, really great charity. You know where the money is going, and 100% of the money is going there. So check that out. Again, just a big thank you to Chevy for coming on and talking with me. I think that's it. So thank you so much for sticking with us and hanging around. We mentioned Overclocked Remix, OC Remix. That's where we get the music for the show every week. Every week we include in the show description, where you can find the track we used, who did it, all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out if you're ever interested in the music we play to close out the show. And with that, I'll I'll see you on the flippity dippity.